Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope y'all are doing well and happy new year to all of y'all. So today we're finally going to be checking out the new Fenty Powder Foundation. I know I just said finally like it's been out for like a month already, but I ordered mine online. This came out last week, the day after Christmas. I ordered mine online, so I've been impatiently waiting for my package to arrive and it's finally here. So today I'm going to be doing my first impression and a wear test on this powder foundation. I'm also going to be doing a demo on how to apply powder foundation for those of us who are beginners, specifically in the 40 plus age range, or as I like to call us, the grown and gorgeous crew. And we're going to see if this powder foundation is a good option for those of us with more mature skin. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so here is the new powder foundation. I'm sure you guys have seen the packaging like a million times by now. I think this is like a hybrid between the liquid foundation and all of the makeup that they have that comes in compact form, because I guess the white color is reminding me of the lids for their liquid foundation, but then the shape of this is more along the lines of all of their other makeup that comes in a compact, but it's just a little different. But I think the packaging is nice. The one like minor issue that I have with the packaging, I don't really like how the makeup, so the makeup is in here. I don't really like how this moves up and down so easily. I kind of wish that this would just stay in place unless I manually move it myself. But other than that, I think the packaging is fine. So this retails for $36. It comes in the same 50 shades as their liquid foundations. This is supposed to be buildable, light to full coverage depending on how you apply it. It's supposed to be long wearing, supposed to be light as air, non-cakey, and all that good stuff. Now, per the website, you're supposed to take your liquid foundation shade if you already know that, and you're supposed to use that as a guide to get your shade in the powder foundation, but the website does say that you may have to go a shade lighter for the powder. So I wear 340 in the liquid foundation, or sometimes I mix 340 and 380, and I couldn't tell by the swatches online what shade to get. So I was thinking, because they're saying that you might have to go a shade lighter, maybe 340 is all I'm going to need. But I decided to get both just to be on the safe side. And looking at them in person, I have no idea what shade I'm going to use. So this one is 340 and this one is 380. So if you look at them up against my face, I feel like 340 looks like it's going to be a little too light, but 380 looks like it might be a little too dark. But I'm wondering if when you put them on, if they get a little darker as you blend it out, because that's what I experienced with the liquid foundation. So I'm hoping I don't have to mix both, but I did get both of them just in case. Now, I also decided to get shade 440 because my plan was to try this out as a bronzer. And again, if my foundation shade does blend out darker on my skin, then maybe I can use 440 as a bronzer. But looking at it in the pan, it looks a lot lighter than I was expecting. And then when you look at the swatches on the boxes, and this is for all three shades that I got, I feel like the swatches, I hope you guys can see that. Let me see. I feel like the swatch on the box is a little bit darker than what it looks like in the pan. But again, maybe this is more representative of what it's going to look like when you blend it out on your skin. So I may be testing this one out as a bronzer, but it's definitely lighter than my Fenty Cocoa Naughty bronzer and my Charlotte Tilbury bronzer, so we'll see. Okay, so I wanted to show y'all some comparison swatches. So all of these are shades 340. So the one that's in the middle here, this one is the powder foundation, and it was kind of difficult to build it up, but I hope y'all can see that. This one on the top, this one is the hydrating foundation, and the one on the bottom is the soft matte foundation. But all of these are in the shade 340. And based on what I'm looking at, I know it might be kind of difficult for y'all to see the powder swatch, but to me it does look a tad darker than the other two. This swatch is just like a better swatch. It looks like more product up there, but in terms of the color of all three, it does look like the powder one is just a little bit darker than the other two. So the website did say that you may have to go a shade lighter with your powder, so just keep that in mind. If you do look at a different shade though, just make sure that you're also paying attention to the undertone that you're getting, because that may be different from shade to shade. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick demo on how to apply powder foundation in case you're not familiar with how to do that. So in case you're new here, I usually don't wear foundation primer, and I never wear primer when I'm testing out a foundation for the first time, because I like to see how the foundation is going to work on my skin without the assistance of a primer, at least the first time that I wear it. So I'm not going to be wearing a primer today, but if you have any kind of texture on your skin, you might want to consider using a primer with a powder foundation, because when you're using a liquid foundation won't make your texture disappear or anything, but it'll just kind of like glide itself over any type of texture that you have on your skin. When you're using a powder, you're going to have to like manually help the powder like apply or blend over any type of texture. So a powder foundation will definitely go on better if you have like a smoother base. So if you have any kind of texture, then you might want to consider like a smoothing primer, or use like a moisturizer that has like smoothing properties in it. But just so you'll know, I'm not going to be using a primer for today. Whether or not you're using a primer though, you do have to make sure that your skin is adequately prepped. So I do have on my moisturizer and sunscreen. So the foundation is supposed to give you anywhere from light to full coverage depending on how you apply it. So if you watched my beginners video on makeup brushes and sponges for beginners, we talked about how the density of your brush, the bristles on your brush, it determines the level of coverage that you're going to get from a product. So the same thing will apply with a powder foundation. So first, let me show you an example of a brush that I would not recommend for applying powder foundation, and this is the e.l.f. Total Face brush. This brush is like really loose. The bristles like move around really easily. So this brush is more suitable for like setting, like using like a finishing powder or a setting powder to just like dust the powder over your face. But if you look at how easily the bristles push down on my face, there's really no like resistance there. This type of brush is not going to give you any type of coverage from a powder foundation. So if you want like light to medium coverage from your powder foundation, I would use something like this. So if we compare it to the brush that I would not recommend, something like this has a little bit more movement in the bristles, but it's not all that dense. So this one will allow you to build up coverage, but like only to a certain level, and there's just a tad bit more resistance when you put a brush like this on your face. So I think something like this would be good for light to medium coverage. And then if you want to go for medium to full coverage, I would recommend one of these types of brushes. So I think this is the brush that I'm going to be using today. This is the NYX number 3 brush, and as you can see, when I move the bristles around, there's some movement there, but you see how more dense and more tightly packed these bristles are. That is going to give you more coverage than a brush like this, and certainly more coverage than a brush like this one. These other two brushes are good options too, because again, they're really nice and dense, they're really tightly packed, but you do still have like a little bit of movement in the bristles. I feel like these two will give you more coverage than this. So maybe if you already know that you want to go for full coverage, maybe brushes like this, but I'm gonna go for something like this because I feel like this one you can build it up from medium to full. But just make sure whatever brush that you use, just make sure you're paying attention to the density of the bristles, because again, the more tightly packed they are, the more you're able to build the product up to full coverage if that's what you want. So the rule of thumb for applying a powder foundation is to go in with any liquids or creams first, just because it's easier to blend in that order. It's not all that easy to blend out a liquid or a cream on top of a powder. So a lot of people like to start with their concealer first, and that's what I'm going to do today. So I'm going to be using the Estee Lauder Double Wear Concealer for today. So normally if we were applying a liquid foundation, we would have some of the liquid foundation foundation on our under eye area, and that is going to give us a little more coverage even before we go in with our concealer. But since I'm not putting my foundation on first, I'm going to be using a concealer that's going to give me just a little bit more coverage. Like normally I would use my my Too Faced concealer, but this one is better for in my opinion, it's better for powder foundation because it's thicker, it's more creamy, and it's going to give you a bit more coverage. So even though this is a foundation brush, this is the one that I like to use for my concealer. So I'm just going to start by blending out the concealer in the normal manner that I usually would, like even if I were using a liquid foundation. And if you're a little older, if you have like more mature skin, I know I say this in like all of the beginner videos, but you always want to think about less is more, because you just really cannot keep packing product onto your face. So you just want to put on however much you need to get the desired result. Don't put more product on than you need, so you really don't have to have like your entire face covered with concealer, because if you're gonna do that, then you might as well use your powder foundation more as like a finishing powder or as a setting powder for your concealer. But if you're gonna be putting concealer pretty much on most of the inner part of your face and it's like covering up almost all of your face, that kind of defeats the purpose of using the powder foundation as foundation, because your concealer is already giving you the coverage that you need. So we're only going to be putting the concealer in the areas where we want to highlight our face. Okay, and then I'm going to go in and set my concealer just like I normally would. So I'm using the Coty Airspun powder, and I'm just picking some of that up on a damp sponge and just setting it over anywhere where I've applied that concealer. And then if you're using a setting powder that's also like a brightening powder on top of your concealer, that's also going to add to the brightness in those areas. Okay, so let's jump into the powder foundation. So it does come with a sponge. I just got a little bit of foundation on the sponge, but it does come with a sponge. Now, going back to like the different types of brushes that I would or would not use to apply a powder foundation, if you go in with a sponge like this, or you know, something like this is going to give you more coverage. But something like this I think is good to have for on the go, but that's really the only time that I would use this to apply the powder foundation. I would use stick with a brush to apply it, and maybe use this if you need to touch up while you're out of the house. Now, I know a lot of people, including myself, we like to use powder foundations for quick application days because it is a good tool to be able to just throw something on your face really fast and go. But if you're looking for your powder foundation to be like your main source of coverage, and you want it to give you like a more flawless look that's going to last throughout the day, you really need to like work it into your skin. So using something like this to just brush the powder foundation over your face, that's going to cause the powder to just kind of like sit on your skin, and it's not really like blended in with your skin. So again, I would only use something like this to just like touch up on the go. So I'm gonna go in with, I think I'm gonna use my NYX number 3 brush. I'm gonna take my brush and I'm just going to really pat it in there. And I am picking up a good amount of product. I don't want to pick up too much because it is saying light to full coverage, but I want to start off with maybe lighter coverage and then build it up as I go. So remember, when we're putting makeup on our face, whether it be powder, foundation, concealer, or whatever the case may be, we want to build our products up. We don't want to go right in with full coverage because maybe we don't need that much stuff on our face. So we only want to put on as much as we need to get our desired result. So I may end up going in with more, we'll see. I'm just going to tap off a little bit of the excess here. And then I always start applying foundation on my cheeks. That's just naturally where I like to start. But what I'm going to do is just apply this around the areas where I have my concealer, and some of this may end up like overlapping my setting powder. That's not a big deal, but for the most part I'm just going to be applying it around my concealer. So I like to do like kind of like a pat and stipple motion, very similar to how I would blend out my liquid foundations, but I like to kind of take my time and pat and stipple it in. And then the more you do this, the more you're kind of like making the powder become one with your skin. Okay, so this is the first thing that I'm noticing. I know that you guys can still see a lot of stuff peeking through my skin, but I do think that it is giving me like a good amount of coverage because I didn't put a whole lot of stuff on my face. But the main thing that I'm noticing so far is that I feel like this part of my face where I just blended it out, I feel like it looks really blurred, and that is like one of the main claims of the foundation. It looks like this part of my skin is kind of like filtered. It looks really like smooth right here, but I'm gonna keep going, and I'm just gonna put on as much as I think I need. Let me know if you guys can see a difference. Like, I only have it on my cheeks for right now, but this part of my face looks like super smooth. It really looks like filtered. Wow, I really like the coverage of it so far. I think I just said I like the coverage of it. I meant to say I like the finish of it so far. The coverage is nice too, but I was talking more so about the finish that I really like. Okay, I'm gonna stop right here. So I have the foundation on this side of my face and I don't have anything over here. So let me know what y'all think, but I feel like this side of my face does look like really blurred, and it looks like really like smooth. So I think that I'm getting like medium coverage. I feel like I can still see a whole lot of stuff peeking through, but I like the level of coverage that this is giving me. I think that this is really good for people who have more mature skin because you can put on just a little bit of product and still get like some coverage payoff from it. And that's something that I always look for, because again, as you get older, you just don't want to like be packing stuff onto your face. So far I like the level of coverage. Like, even though you can still see some stuff coming through, like this is kind of like the level of coverage that I go for in my foundations. But what I am going to do is I'm going to switch to another brush. So this is one of the other brushes that I said I would recommend for a powder foundation. This one to me is just a little bit more dense than the first one that we used, and I am going to see if I can build it up to full coverage like right in this area. So same thing that I did before, I'm just like pressing the powder, or the brush rather, into the powder, and then I'm just going to concentrate it right up in this area. And yeah, soon as I start applying it with this like more dense brush, it is giving me more coverage and it's covering this area a lot better. So I would say it's nice and buildable, and I do think yes, you can build it to full coverage. I have like a little situation going on right here. I don't want to put a whole lot of stuff on top of that, but yeah, I feel like it covered up really nicely. I actually think I like this brush better than the first one that I was using. But just make sure whatever you use to apply the powder foundation that you're taking your time and working it into your skin. This will help it, like, you know, bind with the skin a little bit more, and this will definitely help it last longer. I'm going to quickly apply the foundation on this side of my face. Okay, so I have the makeup all over my face, and I feel like this is like medium, like almost full coverage. I still have just a little bit of stuff showing through, but this is like the level of coverage that I like. I do think you can build it up to full coverage. You know what? Let me just try this sponge, because if you're out and about, I mean, I know we're wearing masks right now, but whenever we can stop wearing the mask, let's just say you're out and about. Let's try this, and I'm gonna try it right here. Yeah, I mean, this works for like touch-ups, but I feel like that's all it's good for, is like touch-ups. But yeah, it works. It does what it's supposed to do. Okay, so this is what we're looking like, and my first impression is I really like it. Like, I feel like my face looks really smooth, really flawless, and I think that I was able to easily get it up to this level of coverage. I think the main thing that I like about this so far, though, is how smooth my face looks. Like, I really feel like that whole blurring effect claim is true, because I just feel like my face looks like really smooth right now. So I am going to dip into 440, and I think I will try this out as a bronzer. So because I'm applying this one as a bronzer and not as a foundation, I'm using a very loose brush, and I'm not picking up quite as much product. Oh yeah, this would be a good bronzer shade for me. Ooh, I like this. I definitely like the color of this as a bronzer on me better than the Cocoa Naughty bronzer. I feel like that one is just a little tiny bit too dark for me. This one is also just a tad lighter than my Charlotte Tilbury bronzer. I think I like this. Yeah, I like this as a bronzer. Okay, I went ahead and did the rest of my makeup off camera, so this is my completed face for today. So my initial impression on this powder foundation, so far I do really like it. So we are going to be doing a wear test today, but my initial thoughts, I like the way that it applied. I love how, I can't get over how like smooth the foundation looks on my face. I am seeing just a little bit of creasing in my forehead, but everything creases on my forehead. It's not creasing up nearly as much as other foundations that I've worn, but so far I really like it. I think it has like a really nice smooth finish to it, and it just looks really nice and natural. It really doesn't look too much like a powder on my face. So far so good. So we are going to be doing a wear test. So it is now almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This is like pretty late for me to be starting a wear test, but I'm going to try to stretch it to 8 hours. So I will be back in a little bit, and then I will give y'all my final thoughts. Okay guys, I'm back. It is going on 10:30 in the evening, so I almost made it to the 8-hour mark, right? Hey, I think that was almost 8 hours. So as you can see, I am definitely oily in my T-zone, and that's where I always get oily. So that's pretty normal for me. Aside from that, I actually unexpectedly had to keep putting a mask on and taking it off like quite a bit since I filmed the first part of the video, and I wasn't expecting to have to wear a mask at all today, but I actually had a mask on for a long time. So I'm sweating a little bit on my upper lip area because I did like just take the mask off like right before I started filming this part. So the makeup is like broken up a little bit around my mouth. But I feel like other than that, especially for having a mask on, I think that the makeup held up pretty well. It's definitely not like transfer resistant, like there was, you know, a good amount of makeup on my mask, but I wasn't really planning on testing that anyway. But I feel like for the most part it held up pretty well. The last thing I'm gonna test though, I'm gonna kind of test the makeup as like a, where's the foundation? I'm gonna test the makeup as kind of like a setting powder. So I'm just gonna like refresh my T-zone to see how the makeup refreshes. So I'm just gonna take a piece of tissue and I'm just gonna lightly blot my T-zone area. And I always like to blot the T-zone area before I go back in with powder so that I'm not like pushing that oil back into my skin. So of course that right there, just blotting it, made a big difference. So now I'm gonna take the foundation again, and this time I'm gonna pick up like a big fluffy brush, and I'm gonna use this to just set my T-zone and see if it makes a difference. I'm gonna start out with just that much powder. That's only like a very little bit of powder. And I'm just gonna reapply on my forehead and then a little bit on the sides of my nose. I'm also gonna put a little bit more around my mouth just to see if I can add a little more coverage back to this area. And let me go ahead and take a little bit of 440. This is the darker one, and I'm just gonna apply some of that like right around my hairline. This is where I used shade 440 as a bronzer earlier today. And I forgot that I just took off my glasses too, so that's why I have those little marks on the sides of my nose. Let me just pat over those really quickly as well. Okay, so I think the makeup refreshes pretty good. I feel like for the most part it looks like I just put the makeup back on. So overall, my final thoughts on this, I do think it's a really good powder foundation. I think in terms of how it applies and how it builds up. Now I only built this up to like a strong like medium coverage, but I do think it's good for building it up to full coverage. But in terms of how it applies, in terms of how it builds up on itself, I really don't think that there's anything like spectacular about it compared to like other powder foundations that I've tried. I'm not like a powder foundation junkie, but I have tried like a handful of other powder foundations, and to me it just performs like a normal powder foundation. Where I do think it stands out though is the finish that it gives you on your skin, because even before I built it up to this medium coverage, like when I just put like a light coverage on my face, I could tell that my skin looked like really kind of, you know, blurred and like filtered. And I feel like even now it still looks like, you know, it's giving me like a blurring effect like on the sides of my nose. I feel like you really can't see my pores right there. It just really has a really nice beautiful finish on the skin. If you have more mature skin, if you're like in that 40 plus age range and you're looking for a powder foundation, I think that this would be a good option, because like I said earlier, I think that you can build this product up and get good coverage from it without having to put too much of the product on your face. So that's another thing that I really like about it. So overall, I love it so far. So let me know what y'all think in the comments. Thank y'all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe before you leave today, and I will see you back here for my next video. Until then, take care. Have a good one, y'all. Bye.